Waitress danced with a pale disabled boy, unaware his vampire king dad was watching. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. Picture this, a bustling restaurant on a cold evening, the aroma of rich food filling the air. Among the well-dressed patrons, a humble waitress navigates through the crowd, balancing a tray loaded with drinks and plates. Her name is Emily, and her life has always been a balancing act between multiple jobs and barely making ends meet. Tonight, she's working the late shift at a high-end restaurant, a job she never imagined she'd have, but one she needs to keep the lights on. Emily, a woman in her late 20s, has a kind heart but a tired soul. She smiles politely at the guests, her eyes always scanning for the next order or problem to solve. But something about this night feels different. She moves through the dining room with practiced ease, her worn shoes clicking against the polished floor. The lights above cast soft shadows on the guests' faces, but it's the corner table that catches her eye, a young boy sitting alone. His skin is pale, almost ghostly, and he looks fragile. He's staring down at the table, his hands resting on his lap, gripping something tightly. Emily feels an instant wave of sympathy. She's seen him before, often alone, never with a parent or guardian. There's something about his quiet demeanor that stirs something in her. She walks over to his table, her footsteps light but measured, not wanting to startle him. "Hey there, how are you doing?" she asks, her voice soft but warm. The boy looks up slowly, his eyes deep pools of sadness. His gaze meets hers, and for a moment, she sees something that catches her breath, an eerie, almost otherworldly presence in those eyes. His lips part, but no words come out. Emily glances down at the table, noticing the small item clutched in his hands, an intricate pendant shaped like a crown, glowing faintly. She tries not to make him uncomfortable, but asks gently, "Would you like something to drink? Maybe some water?" The boy nods slowly, his movements deliberate but stiff. As she walks away to fetch his drink, she feels a strange shiver run down her spine. It's as if she's being watched. She looks around the room, and that's when she sees him. The man in the corner, standing tall, his presence commanding yet hidden in the shadows. He's not just any man. He's too handsome, too perfect. His sharp features, dark eyes, and regal bearing give him an air of authority that makes the air feel thick with tension. He doesn't move, but Emily can feel his gaze on her. Her heart skips a beat, and she shakes it off, thinking it's just the stress of the night getting to her. But as she returns with the boy's water, she sees the man's eyes still locked on her, and something about that moment feels unsettling. The boy looks up at her again, his face now expressionless. He takes the water, his fingers brushing hers as he reaches for the glass, and in that instant, Emily's heart skips another beat. She doesn't understand why, but the feeling of being watched intensifies. What she doesn't know is that the man in the corner is not just an ordinary guest. He's the boy's father, the vampire king. And tonight, he's been watching every move she makes. Emily, completely unaware of who he truly is, continues with her duties, never knowing that her life is about to be forever changed by a single dance with a boy she barely knows. Emily returned to the boys' table, the strange feeling of being watched still lingering in the back of her mind. The air around her seemed to thicken, and as she placed the water in front of him, she noticed the boy's eyes following her every move. His gaze, dark and unblinking, made her feel uneasy, but she brushed it off as just the stress of the night. "Is everything okay?" she asked, offering a smile she hoped was reassuring. The boy nodded, his face expressionless. He didn't say a word, just picked up the glass of water slowly, almost mechanically, and took a small sip. Emily couldn't help but feel sorry for him. There was something so vulnerable about him, like he was carrying a heavy burden no one could understand. "You're here alone?" she asked gently, glancing around the empty restaurant. But his response was only a slight tilt of his head. Before she could speak again, the soft click of the door caught her attention, and she turned to see a figure stepping into the room. It was the man from earlier, the one who had been watching her from the shadows. He was tall, with a commanding presence, dressed in dark, elegant clothing that seemed to absorb the light. His eyes, a piercing shade of amber, locked onto hers as if he had been waiting for her to notice him. Emily's heart skipped a beat. There was something about him that was unsettling yet captivating, like a force of nature she couldn't escape. She quickly turned away, telling herself to focus on her job. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked the boy, forcing a smile. But the boy's gaze never left her, and it felt as if he was silently pleading with her. Emily's hand trembled slightly as she turned to walk back to the kitchen, but as she passed the man at the bar, she couldn't resist glancing at him one more time. He hadn't moved, but his eyes were still fixed on her, studying her with a calm intensity that made her stomach flutter. She couldn't explain why, but she felt as though she was drawn to him, like a moth to a flame. She quickly shook off the thought and headed back to the kitchen, trying to distract herself with the busy evening ahead. The hours seemed to pass in a blur. Emily moved between tables, taking orders, delivering food, and making small talk with the customers. But all the while, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every time she passed the corner table where the boy sat, she caught a glimpse of his eyes, dark and full of mystery, watching her with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. She told herself to focus on her work, but every time she looked in his direction, there he was, his eyes never leaving her. As the evening wore on, the restaurant began to empty out, and Emily was able to relax a little. The boy was still sitting alone at the corner table, and the man was nowhere to be seen. Emily felt a strange sense of relief, though she couldn't quite explain why. She decided to take a short break, stepping outside for a breath of fresh air. The night was cool, and the city lights glowed softly in the distance. As she leaned against the railing, trying to clear her head, she felt a presence behind her. She turned around, and there, standing just a few feet away, was the man. His eyes were still that same intense amber, and he was staring at her with an almost unsettling calmness. "Is something wrong?" Emily asked, her voice shaky. The man smiled slightly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I just wanted to thank you," he said, his voice smooth and deep. "Thank me?" Emily asked, confused. "For what?" "For being kind to my son," he replied, his gaze flicking to the door of the restaurant, where the boy still sat alone. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know why, but she felt a deep sense of unease. "Your son?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man's smile faded slightly. "Yes, he's special. And you, Emily, have no idea just how special you are to him." The words hung in the air between them, and Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She couldn't explain it, but something about the man, about the boy, seemed to stir something deep inside her, something she couldn't quite put into words. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "What do you mean?" The man's eyes softened, though there was still an air of mystery about him. "It's complicated," he said, his voice gentle but filled with an unspoken weight. "But don't worry. You'll find out soon enough." Before Emily could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the night. Emily stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Her mind raced with questions, but there were no answers. All she knew was that her life had just taken a turn she never saw coming. As she returned to the restaurant, the boy was still there, waiting. But now, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something far more significant at play, something that would change everything she thought she knew about the world around her. The next few days at the restaurant were a blur for Emily. She found herself distracted, her mind constantly drifting back to the strange encounter with the man. She had tried to shake off the unease, but every time she closed her eyes, his amber gaze lingered in her thoughts. His words echoed in her mind. "You'll find out soon enough." What did he mean by that? And the boy, his son, there was something so unusual about him, something that couldn't be ignored. Emily couldn't help but feel drawn to him, like there was some invisible thread connecting their fates. She told herself it was just her imagination running wild, but the feeling wouldn't go away. She couldn't help but wonder why he had been so intrigued by her. Her curiosity was piqued. Late one evening, Emily was wiping down a table near the entrance when she saw the boy again. This time, he was not sitting at his usual corner, but standing by the door, waiting. His pale face looked even more fragile than before, and his eyes were wide, as if he was lost in thought. She hesitated for a moment, but her heart urged her to approach him. "Hey there," she greeted gently, her voice soft. Are you okay? The boy turned to face her, his eyes meeting hers with a kind of intensity that made her pause. He didn't speak, but for the first time, she noticed something different in his eyes. They weren't just filled with sadness. They were filled with something else, something more profound. It was as if he was trying to tell her something, but he couldn't find the words. Emily knelt down to his level, hoping to comfort him. Is everything all right? She asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. The boy's lips trembled slightly, and then, finally, he spoke. He's here. His voice was so soft, almost inaudible, but it was enough to make Emily freeze. Who? She asked, confused. My father, he whispered, his voice breaking. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had seen the boy's father before, the man who had watched her with such intensity. But now, hearing the boy mention him, it felt like everything was falling into place. Before Emily could respond, the boy turned and slowly walked toward the back of the restaurant, disappearing into the shadows. Emily stood there, her mind racing. What was going on? Why did he say that? And why did she feel this strange pull toward them both? She couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was unfolding, something that would change her life forever. Her thoughts were interrupted when the man appeared again, stepping into the restaurant with that same commanding presence. He walked toward her with purpose, his eyes never leaving her. Emily felt her pulse quicken. Not again, she thought, but she couldn't stop herself from meeting his gaze. As he approached, he gave her a small nod, acknowledging her. You're still here, he said, his voice smooth but laced with an undercurrent of something darker. Emily swallowed, trying to steady her nerves. I don't understand, she said, her voice shaky. What is all of this? The man smiled, but it wasn't a smile that reached his eyes. It's complicated, he said, but you'll understand soon enough. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. There was something so unsettling about the way he spoke, as if he knew more than he was letting on. I don't understand, she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. Why me? Why are you? She couldn't finish the question. He held up a hand, silencing her. You don't need to understand everything right now, he said, his tone softer. But I think it's time you meet my son. Emily blinked, stunned. His son? She thought. She had no idea what was going on, but the way he spoke, the way he looked at her, made it clear that this was no ordinary situation. He wasn't just a father. He was something more, something ancient. The man turned and gestured for her to follow him. Come, he said, his voice carrying an air of authority that she couldn't ignore. Emily hesitated for a moment, but something inside her urged her to go. She followed him down the corridor, her heart pounding in her chest. They arrived at a small, dimly lit room in the back of the restaurant. There, sitting by a window, was the boy. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something else, something Emily couldn't quite place. He looked up as she entered, his expression softening slightly. The man stepped forward, placing a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. This is my son, Adrien, he said, his voice steady. Emily took a step closer, her heart racing. She had so many questions, but the boy's presence was overwhelming. There was something about him, something about his connection to the man, that she couldn't quite understand. He's not like other kids, the man continued, his voice softer now. He has abilities that others don't understand. And now, Emily, you're involved in this. Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She had never felt so out of her depth, so completely caught in a world she didn't belong to. I don't know what you mean, she said, her voice trembling. The man's gaze softened. It's all right, he said, his tone reassuring. You'll understand everything soon enough. But Emily wasn't so sure. As she looked at the boy, she realized that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. As Emily stood there, in the dimly lit room with the man and his son, she felt a cold sweat trickle down the back of her neck. The words the man had spoken echoed in her mind. You're involved now. What did that even mean? She glanced at the boy, Adrien, who sat quietly by the window, his pale skin almost glowing in the low light. His eyes, still dark with emotion, were locked on her, making her heart race. She didn't know why, but she could feel an invisible connection between them, something deeper than mere sympathy. She could sense his pain, his confusion, but there was more, something mysterious and unnerving. The man stepped closer to her, his presence overwhelming. I understand this is all a lot for you to process, he said, his voice steady, yet filled with something Emily couldn't quite place, perhaps regret or even sorrow. But you need to understand that Adrien isn't like other children. Emily swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. What do you mean by that? She asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. The man's eyes softened for a moment as he looked down at his son. He's not human, Emily. He's a vampire. Emily froze. The word hung in the air like a thick fog, heavy with meaning. Vampire. She had heard stories, of course, about creatures of the night, but those were just tales, fairy tales. Yet, standing here, in this room with the man and his son, something inside her told her that the stories might be real. That's impossible, she whispered, more to herself than to the man. The man nodded slowly, as if he had expected her to react this way. I know it's hard to believe, but it's the truth. Adrien is the heir to a very old and powerful lineage, one that has existed for centuries. And now, his life, and ours, has become entangled with yours. Emily felt the world around her start to tilt. She was hearing this from a man who, though human in appearance, exuded an air of power that made him seem anything but normal. His words were like a punch to her gut, and she could feel the ground beneath her feet shifting. Why me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing his response. I can't explain everything right now, he said, his voice low and solemn. But I will tell you this. You have something Adrien needs. Something that could save him. The silence in the room was deafening. Emily's mind raced, trying to process everything he was saying, but it felt like too much. Save him? She asked, barely able to make sense of the words. Save him from what? The man stepped closer to his son, his face hardening. From a curse, he said. A curse that has bound our family for centuries. Adrien's life has been plagued by it since the day he was born. And now, it's up to you to break it. Emily's stomach churned. She didn't understand. How could she, just a waitress, be the one to break some ancient curse? But the man's eyes, filled with a strange intensity, told her he wasn't lying. I don't know how I can help, she said, feeling a surge of panic rising in her chest. I don't even know what's happening. The man's gaze softened. I know this is overwhelming, he said, but the curse has been tied to Adrien's bloodline for centuries. He's the key to breaking it. And you, Emily, have been chosen to help him. You are the only one who can. Emily shook her head, trying to process his words. I'm not special, she stammered. I'm just a waitress. I don't have any powers or anything like that. The man reached out, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. You may not understand it yet, but you do have something special, something that can help Adrien. And in return, you will be given the answers you seek. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. What answers? She thought. But before she could voice her question, the boy, Adrien, spoke up. His voice was quiet but clear. I don't want to be a vampire, he said, his words full of sadness. I don't want to live like this. Emily's heart broke at the sound of his voice, filled with so much pain. She wanted to reach out to him, to comfort him, but she didn't know how. The man looked down at his son, his expression softening. I know, son, but we don't always get to choose the path we're given. But you have a chance to change yours, with Emily's help. Adrien's eyes flicked toward Emily, and for the first time, she saw a glimmer of hope in them. It was fleeting, but it was there. The man turned to Emily again, his expression serious. There are forces at play here that you cannot begin to understand. But we are running out of time. The curse is tightening its grip on Adrien, and if it's not broken soon, it will be too late. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't know what she was getting into, but something deep inside her told her she couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when a child's life was on the line. What do I need to do? She asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. The man nodded. For now, all I ask is that you stay close to Adrien. Keep him safe, and trust that we will help you unlock the power you need. But remember, Emily, there are those who would do anything to stop you. You must be careful. Emily nodded, though her mind was reeling. She didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. Her life would never be the same again. The days that followed were a whirlwind of confusion for Emily. She couldn't shake the feeling that everything in her life had changed in an instant, and she wasn't sure whether it was for better or worse. The weight of the man's words still hung over her, and her thoughts constantly returned to Adrien, the pale, fragile boy with the amber eyes, who now seemed to be at the center of something much bigger than she could ever understand. Emily tried to push it all aside as she worked, but she couldn't help but feel like she was being pulled deeper into a world that she wasn't prepared for. One evening, after the restaurant had cleared out and she was cleaning the tables, she saw Adrien again. This time, he wasn't sitting at the corner, as usual. Instead, he was standing by the door, his small frame almost hidden in the shadows. His eyes locked onto hers the moment she saw him, and there was an intensity in his gaze that made her heart race. He looked so much older than his years, like he was carrying a burden too heavy for anyone so young to bear. Emily hesitated for a moment, but then her feet moved of their own accord, carrying her toward him. "Adrien," she called softly, her voice uncertain. The boy didn't speak, but he stepped forward, his face unreadable. He didn't look fragile now. There was a quiet strength in his posture, a sense of purpose that had been absent before. When he was close enough, Emily could see the faint glow of something in his eyes, something that wasn't quite human. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrien nodded, but he didn't speak. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, something that glimmered faintly in the dim light of the restaurant. It was a pendant, just like the one she had seen him clutching before. The same intricate, crown-like shape. "What is it?" Emily asked, her curiosity piqued. Adrien held it out to her, his hands trembling slightly. "It's the key," he said softly. His voice was almost haunting, the words carrying a weight that made Emily's stomach tighten. "The key to breaking the curse." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "The curse?" she repeated. Adrien nodded again, his eyes still locked onto hers. "My father told you about it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not just about me. It's about everything." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. She had a sinking feeling that she had been unknowingly caught in the middle of something far more dangerous than she could ever imagine. "I don't understand," she admitted, her voice trembling. "What do you mean?" Adrien's expression softened, though there was still a deep sadness in his eyes. "The curse isn't just on me," he said. "It's on my whole family. On all of us. And it's been getting worse. My father and I, we're running out of time." Emily felt her heart beat faster, her mind racing. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. Adrien's lips trembled as he spoke. "You have to help me break it. You're the only one who can." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Emily didn't know what was happening, but one thing was clear. She was already in too deep to walk away now. "How?" she asked, almost afraid of the answer. Adrien looked down at the pendant in his hand, his fingers brushing over it softly. "It's connected to the bloodline," he said. "To my bloodline. And yours." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "My bloodline," she repeated, her voice barely audible. Adrien nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "You're part of it now. You've been chosen to help us. To break the curse." Emily shook her head, trying to make sense of what he was saying. "But how is that possible? I'm just a waitress." Adrien's eyes softened with a touch of sadness. "It's not about who you are now," he said. "It's about who you were meant to be." Emily felt her knees go weak. The room seemed to spin around her, and for a moment, she thought she might collapse. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't help you if I don't understand what's happening." Adrien took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "You don't need to understand everything yet," he said softly. "But you will. In time. All I need is for you to trust me." Emily hesitated, unsure of what to do. Her entire world had been turned upside down, and now she was being asked to trust a boy she barely knew, one who claimed to be a vampire, cursed for centuries. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something that made her heart ache, a vulnerability, a fear that made her want to protect him. "I'll help you," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her heart. Adrien nodded, his expression softening. "Thank you," he whispered. "You don't know how much this means to me." But as she looked at him, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, and that the road ahead would be far darker and more dangerous than she could ever imagine. The days following Emily's promise to help Adrien were filled with confusion and uncertainty. She tried to focus on her work at the restaurant, But her mind kept wandering back to the boy and the mysterious curse that seemed to be connected to him. Despite her fear, there was an undeniable pull between her and Adrien, something she couldn't ignore. She had seen the way his eyes had lit up when she agreed to help him, and though she still didn't fully understand what was going on, she felt as though she had no choice but to see it through. One evening, after the last customers had left, Emily was cleaning up when the door opened, and she heard the soft click of footsteps entering the restaurant. She turned to see the man, Adrien's father, standing in the doorway. His expression was as unreadable as ever, but there was a subtle shift in his demeanor that made Emily's heart race. "I think it's time," he said, his deep voice breaking the silence. Emily froze. "Time for what?" she asked, her voice tight with anxiety. The man's amber eyes flicked toward the kitchen, where Adrien was waiting. "Time for you to begin your training," he replied. "There is much for you to learn if you are to help my son." Emily's stomach twisted. She had no idea what kind of training this man was talking about, but she knew she wasn't ready for whatever was coming. But Adrien needed her, and that was enough to keep her moving forward. She nodded slowly, though doubt gnawed at her insides. "All right," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. The man gave her a faint nod of approval before turning on his heel and walking toward the back of the restaurant. Emily followed him hesitantly, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt like she was walking into a world she didn't understand, a world that was far beyond anything she had ever known. As she entered the small, dimly lit room where Adrien was waiting, she saw him sitting by the window, his face pale but determined. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something new in them. A glimmer of hope. "Are you ready?" the man asked, his voice low and commanding. Emily nodded, though she wasn't sure what she was ready for. She had no idea what kind of training she needed, or how she was supposed to break a centuries-old curse. But Adrien's eyes were filled with such trust, such need, that she knew she couldn't back out now. "Good," the man said, stepping forward. "First, you must learn how to connect with Adrien, how to help him break the curse. It won't be easy. There are many dangers ahead, and not just from the curse itself. There are others who will stop at nothing to prevent you from succeeding." Emily's heart raced at the mention of danger. She had no idea who these others were, but she didn't like the sound of it. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The man looked at her for a long moment, as if sizing her up. "You need to learn to trust yourself," he said. "You already have the power within you, but you haven't unlocked it yet. And Adrien needs you to do that." Emily's mind whirled. Power? What power was he talking about? She was just a waitress, a woman with no special abilities. Or so she thought. But as she looked at Adrien, she couldn't help but wonder if there was more to her than she realized. "How do I unlock it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man gave her a small smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "That's something you will have to figure out for yourself," he said. "But I'll be here to guide you." Emily nodded, trying to calm the nervous fluttering in her chest. She wasn't sure what was happening, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't do it alone. Adrien needed her, and she would do whatever it took to help him. The man stepped back, giving her space. "Begin by sitting with Adrien," he said. "Close your eyes, clear your mind, and focus on him. Let his presence fill you. You'll know when the connection happens." Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She glanced at Adrien, who was watching her closely, his face filled with quiet anticipation. She walked over to him and sat down beside him, feeling the weight of his gaze. She closed her eyes, focusing on the sound of her breath, trying to clear her mind of all the noise and confusion that had been swirling in it. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, she felt it, a pull, like a magnetic force drawing her toward Adrien. She felt his presence deep within her, as if their souls were reaching out to connect. Her heart began to race, and she felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a warmth she had never felt before. It was as if a door had been unlocked, a door that had been closed for as long as she could remember. And then, she felt it, a surge of energy, a rush of power that seemed to come from Adrien, filling her and making her feel more alive than she had ever felt before. She gasped, her eyes snapping open. Adrien was staring at her, his eyes glowing faintly with a golden light. She could feel it now, the bond between them, a bond that was stronger than anything she had ever known. "It's working," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. The man nodded, his expression satisfied. You've unlocked the first step, he said. Now, you must learn to control it. But that will come with time. Emily couldn't speak. She was too overwhelmed by the sudden wave of emotions and energy coursing through her. She had no idea what was happening, but she knew that everything had just changed. And there was no turning back now. The days after Emily's connection with Adrien grew stronger, yet more confusing. The bond she felt, though undeniable, seemed to only raise more questions. She could feel the weight of Adrien's existence pressing against her heart, each day that passed pushing her further into a world she didn't recognize, and one she wasn't sure she was prepared for. Despite the sense of urgency that hung in the air, Emily found herself drawn to Adrien more than ever. Each interaction felt more meaningful, more intense, as if each moment was a piece of something much larger. Every time they were together, she could sense his pain and fear, but also a deep yearning for something more, something she wasn't sure she could give him. One evening, after another long day at the restaurant, Emily found herself sitting by the window of her small apartment, her mind still reeling from the day's events. It had been a particularly quiet evening at work, but the silence only made her feel more on edge. She had agreed to help Adrien break the curse, but what exactly was she supposed to do? The weight of the responsibility was starting to wear her down. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. A message from Adrien. It read, "Come to the restaurant. It's time." Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected the call so soon, but she knew deep down that it was time. She grabbed her jacket, feeling a mix of excitement and dread bubbling up inside her. The restaurant was quiet when she arrived, the lights dimmed, and the air still. The only sound was the soft hum of the cooling units in the back. She stepped inside, finding Adrien sitting at the same table he always did, his pale face illuminated by the soft glow of the overhead light. He was looking at her with that same intensity, but now there was something different, something more urgent. "What's happening?" Emily asked, her voice low as she approached him. Adrien stood and motioned for her to follow him. "It's time," he repeated. "You're ready." They moved to the back of the restaurant, to the small, dimly lit room where they had practiced before. The man, Adrien's father, was waiting for them. His amber eyes were focused, his expression serious. "We need to begin," he said, his voice firm. "Adrien has shown you the first step, but now you must learn to harness what you've unlocked. The curse is not just a spell or magic. It's a force, a binding, and it will not be broken without sacrifice." Emily's heart pounded as she listened to him speak. She had known there would be danger, but hearing it confirmed out loud made it feel all the more real. "What kind of sacrifice?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The man met her gaze, his eyes hard and unwavering. "The curse is tied to the blood of Adrien's ancestors. To break it, you will need to give a part of yourself, a part that you can never get back." Emily swallowed, the weight of his words sinking in. She wasn't sure what kind of sacrifice he meant, but she could feel the unease growing in her chest. Adrien's father stepped closer, his voice low. "This is not just about Adrien. This is about your connection to him. You will need to open yourself to the bond completely, to feel his pain, his fear, and his memories. The more you connect with him, the more you will understand the curse, and the more you will have to give up to break it." Emily nodded slowly, her mind racing. She had already felt that pull, that connection between her and Adrien, but now she realized it was only the beginning. There was so much more to this than she had ever imagined. "How do I start?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man's expression softened, though his eyes were still filled with a quiet intensity. "You've already made the first step by trusting Adrien. Now, you must trust yourself." He paused for a moment, as if considering his next words. "When you connect with him, you will feel his past, his ancestors' memories, and the curse itself. It will be overwhelming, but you must not break. If you do, the bond will shatter, and the curse will never be lifted." Emily felt her hands tremble as she absorbed his words. It was a lot to take in. She didn't know if she was ready for what was coming, but there was no turning back now. Adrien stepped forward, his eyes filled with an emotion she couldn't name. "I need you," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please, I can't do this alone." Emily looked at him, her heart heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. She had made a promise, and now she had to keep it. She nodded, taking a deep breath. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice steady. The man stepped back, giving them space. "Remember, Emily, you are not just breaking a curse. You are breaking a legacy, a bloodline that has been bound for centuries. What you do now will change everything." Emily's heart raced as she sat down beside Adrien, feeling the cool air of the room settle around them. She closed her eyes, focusing on the connection between them, trying to clear her mind and prepare herself for what was to come. As she reached out to Adrien, she felt the familiar pull again, stronger this time. His presence filled her, his emotions flooding her like a tide. She could feel his fear, his pain, and his longing. It was as if she was stepping into his world, seeing everything through his eyes. She gasped as she felt his memories start to flood her mind. Ancient memories, full of loss, love, and power. The weight of them nearly crushed her, but she held on. The curse was there. She could feel it, dark and powerful, binding them together. She didn't know how much longer she could hold on, but she had to. For Adrien, she had to break the curse, and she was ready to do whatever it took. The connection between Emily and Adrien deepened with each passing moment, yet every time they tried to understand the curse, the more elusive it became. The room around them seemed to fade into the background, and all that mattered now was the bond they were forging, a bond that tied their destinies together. Emily had never experienced anything like this before. The weight of Adrien's past, his pain, and the powerful force of the curse that bound them both. She felt as though she was no longer in control of her own body. The memories that flooded her mind were overwhelming. The man's words from earlier echoed in her mind. "You're breaking a legacy, a bloodline that has been bound for centuries." Those words had been a warning, but she hadn't fully understood them until now. She could feel Adrien's ancestors, their voices and memories flooding her consciousness. It was as though their entire history was being written inside her. Images of battles fought, love lost, and betrayal lingered in her mind like ghosts, fading in and out of focus. Some memories felt like they belonged to Adrien, others to his father, but all of them carried the same sorrow, the same unshakable grief. It was too much. Emily gasped, her chest tightening as she struggled to keep up with the flood of memories. She could feel Adrien's emotions mixing with her own, fear, longing, hope, but above all, a deep sadness. She wanted to pull away, but the bond was too strong. She couldn't break it now. Adrien's presence filled her, and as much as she wanted to escape, she knew she couldn't. Not without him. "You're doing great," Adrien whispered softly, his voice barely audible, but the sincerity in his words cut through the fog of memories. Emily opened her eyes, blinking against the sudden wave of clarity. She was no longer just a passive observer of Adrien's past. She was connected to him, deeply and irrevocably. She could feel his pulse in her own veins, his every breath syncing with hers. His fear had become her own, and she knew now that the curse wasn't just something he needed to break. It was something they had to face together. But the more she felt, the more she understood that their connection wasn't just about the curse. It was something far more personal, far more profound. She could feel the love that Adrien had lost, the love he longed to regain. The curse wasn't just a punishment. It was the chains that had bound him to a life of isolation and sorrow. The more she connected with him, the more she realized how much he had suffered. But there was something else, something more dangerous that lurked in the depths of his memories. Emily could feel the presence of an enemy, a dark force that threatened to tear them apart. It was a presence so strong that it felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. She gasped, feeling the pressure of the curse tightening around them both. "What is that?" she asked, her voice shaking. Adrien's eyes were wide, his face pale as he struggled to find the words. "It's the council," he said, his voice low. "They've been hunting us for centuries. They want to keep the curse alive. They don't want it broken." Emily's heart sank. She had heard the mention of the council before, but she hadn't fully understood its significance. Now, she realized that their battle wasn't just about breaking the curse, it was about survival. The council wouldn't stop until they destroyed everything Adrien and his family had built. The weight of it all hit Emily like a freight train. She wasn't just facing a curse. She was facing an enemy far older and more powerful than she had ever imagined. "We need to stop them," Emily whispered, her resolve hardening. Adrien nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "We will," he said quietly. "But we need your help. I can't do it alone. I need you to be ready. To fight." Emily looked at him, her heart racing. She had no idea what kind of fight she was about to face, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let Adrien face it alone. She had promised to help him break the curse, but now she realized that breaking it wasn't enough. She had to protect him, protect them both. The man, Adrien's father, stepped into the room just as Emily was processing the weight of the situation. His expression was grim. "The council is already aware of you, Emily," he said, his voice firm. "They will come for you, too. You must be prepared." Emily's stomach churned at his words. The council was coming for her? She had no idea how to fight something like that, but she knew she couldn't back down now. Not when so much was at stake. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. The man stepped forward, his eyes hard and focused. "We train, we prepare, and we fight back." The words echoed in Emily's mind as she stood there, surrounded by Adrien and his father. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. Her life had changed forever, and there was no going back now. Emily felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her as Adrien and his father began to prepare for what was coming. The gravity of the council's threat was real, and she was no longer just a bystander in their world. She was in it now, bound to Adrien, tied to his curse, and facing an enemy far beyond anything she had ever imagined. The reality of her role in this ancient battle started to settle in, but a part of her still resisted. She had never been a fighter, never thought of herself as someone capable of standing up against powerful, ancient beings. Yet here she was, with a task she didn't fully understand, and a future she couldn't control. The days leading up to their training were filled with long nights and heavy silence. Adrien's father, though seemingly distant and cold, had started to teach Emily what she needed to know. The training was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Every lesson was both physically and mentally exhausting, as Adrien's father pushed her further than she thought possible. It wasn't just about learning how to defend herself. It was about learning how to control the connection she had with Adrien, how to channel the strange power that flowed between them. She learned to feel the pulse of his emotions, the sharp edges of his fears, and the deep-rooted sadness that weighed him down. She could feel it in every inch of her body, as if she were becoming more and more attuned to him, to his very essence. But with every new discovery, Emily felt more like she was losing herself. The more she allowed herself to connect with Adrien, the more she felt herself becoming part of his world. She couldn't deny that it was intoxicating, but it was also terrifying. One night, as they sat together in the dimly lit room, Emily felt the bond between them flare to life, more intense than ever before. Adrien was silent, his eyes closed, but she could feel him, his presence wrapping around her like a cloak. "Adrien," she whispered, unsure of what was happening. He opened his eyes slowly, and for the first time in weeks, she saw something new in them, resignation. "It's happening," he said quietly. "The curse is coming for us. The council will stop at nothing to make sure it doesn't break." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had known the danger was real, but hearing it from Adrien, seeing the fear in his eyes, made it all the more tangible. "What can we do?" she asked, her voice shaky. Adrien took a deep breath, his gaze turning toward the shadows that seemed to grow darker by the second. "We fight," he said simply. "We fight, and we protect each other. That's all we can do now." The finality in his voice sent a chill down Emily's spine. She wasn't ready for this, but she knew there was no choice now. As the days passed, the intensity of their training grew. Adrien's father pushed them both harder, testing Emily's limits, forcing her to trust her instincts. She had learned to tap into the strange power she shared with Adrien, but it was exhausting. Every time they connected, she could feel the strain on her body, the way it drained her. And still, the shadow of the council loomed over them, a constant reminder that time was running out. One evening, as they sat in the training room, Emily could feel the familiar pull of the bond between her and Adrien. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to sink into it, to feel his emotions without hesitation. This time, the connection was different. It was sharper, more urgent, as if something had shifted. She could feel Adrien's fear, but there was something else beneath it, something darker, more menacing. "What's happening?" Emily whispered, her voice tight. Adrien's face was pale, his eyes wide with panic. "They're coming," he said, his voice trembling. "The council. They found us." The air in the room grew heavy, the temperature dropping as if in response to the approaching danger. Emily could feel the presence of something dark, something powerful, drawing closer. "We need to go," Adrien's father said, his voice calm but urgent. "Now." Without another word, they rushed from the training room, making their way down the narrow corridors of the house. The walls seemed to close in around them as they moved, the silence pressing in like a suffocating weight. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, and she could feel Adrien's panic growing stronger. They were running out of time. They reached the front door, but as they stepped outside, Emily froze. In the distance, she could see shadows moving toward them, figures cloaked in darkness, their forms flickering in and out of sight like phantoms. She could feel their power, their malevolent presence. The council was here. "Stay close," Adrien's father said, his voice low and commanding. "And don't look back." They moved quickly, but Emily could feel the shadows closing in, their cold touch brushing against her skin. She could hear their voices now, whispers carried on the wind. They were searching for her, for Adrien. "You won't escape," one of the voices said, a cold, malevolent sound that sent chills down her spine. "You belong to us." Emily's pulse quickened, her breath shallow as they moved faster. She could feel Adrien beside her, his presence strong but filled with fear. She had promised to help him, to break the curse, but now it seemed like the battle had only just begun. The council was closing in, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. But Emily wouldn't let them take Adrien. She wouldn't let them take everything they had worked for. She would fight, even if it meant risking everything. The shadows closed in around them as they moved, the oppressive presence of the council growing stronger with each passing moment. Emily could feel the weight of their power pressing against her, the air around them thickening with every step. Adrien's hand gripped hers tightly, his pulse racing in sync with hers, and she could feel the fear emanating from him. But there was something else in his eyes now, something she hadn't seen before: determination. They couldn't let the council catch them. They had no choice but to fight. "Don't look back," Adrien's father said, his voice calm but urgent as he led them down the winding path away from the house. The moonlight bathed the ground in silver, but the darkness around them felt suffocating. Emily's heart hammered in her chest, her breath coming in short gasps as they rushed through the trees. The sounds of their pursuers were faint at first, but soon they could hear the unmistakable whispers on the wind. The council was close. "They're coming for us," Adrien said, his voice tight with panic. Emily squeezed his hand, trying to steady herself. "We need to stay ahead of them," she said, her voice shaky but determined. Adrien nodded, his eyes flashing with the same resolve that she felt. They couldn't stop now. As they neared the edge of the woods, Emily glanced behind them, and her stomach dropped. In the distance, she saw the flickering shapes of the council members, their forms blending with the darkness as they moved with eerie precision. "We need to split up," Adrien's father said, his voice low but commanding. "We'll have a better chance if we confuse them. Emily, go with Adrien. Stay hidden. Don't come out unless I say so." Emily hesitated, but the look in Adrien's eyes left her with no choice. "Be careful," she whispered to him. Adrien nodded. "You too." Without another word, they turned and made their way deeper into the woods, their footsteps muffled by the thick underbrush. Emily's heart raced as she tried to keep her breathing steady, but every sound seemed to echo in her ears. She could feel the weight of the curse growing stronger, and the bond between her and Adrien pulsed like a living thing. She could hear his thoughts as if they were her own, feel his fear, his longing, his determination. And somewhere deep inside, she realized she could feel something else, too, something ancient, something dark. The curse was alive, and it was growing stronger. "We can't keep running forever," Emily said, her voice barely a whisper. Adrien glanced at her, his expression grim. "I know," he said softly, "but we have to keep moving. We have to find a way to break it before they catch us." Emily nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She wasn't sure how much longer they could keep running, but she knew one thing for certain. They couldn't afford to fail. The council would stop at nothing to see them destroyed. As they reached a clearing in the woods, Adrien paused, his eyes scanning the area. "We'll hide here," he said, pulling Emily behind a large rock. They crouched down, trying to stay as quiet as possible. The air felt thick with tension, and Emily could feel the presence of the council growing closer. She could hear their footsteps now, the crunch of leaves and branches underfoot. They were so close. Adrien's grip on her hand tightened, and Emily squeezed back, trying to steady herself. "Stay quiet," Adrien whispered. Emily nodded, but her heart was pounding in her chest. She could feel the dark force of the curse pressing in on her, threatening to consume them both. She knew they didn't have much time. "What if we can't break it?" Emily asked, her voice shaking. "What if we're too late?" Adrien didn't answer immediately, but when he did, his voice was steady. "We're not too late," he said. "We can do this. Together." Emily looked into his eyes, seeing the same determination there that had been with him from the start. It gave her strength, and for a moment, she felt a flicker of hope. They could do this. They had to. The sounds of the council grew louder, and Emily's pulse quickened. She could hear their voices now, calling out to each other in eerie whispers. They were getting closer. Adrien pulled her closer, hiding behind the rock, and she could feel his breath on her ear as he whispered, "We wait here. When the time is right, we move." Emily nodded, holding her breath as the figures of the council appeared on the edge of the clearing. Their eyes gleamed in the moonlight, their forms cloaked in shadows. They moved with terrifying precision, as if they knew exactly where to look. Emily's heart stopped as one of them passed, so close to where they were hiding that she could feel the cold air shift around them. They held their breath, not daring to make a sound. The council member stopped for a moment, glancing around as if sensing something was amiss. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, her body frozen in place. She could feel Adrien's grip tightening on her hand, but neither of them dared to move. The moment stretched on for what felt like an eternity. But then, as suddenly as it had come, the council member moved on, the group continuing their search further into the woods. Emily exhaled, her body trembling with relief. Adrien's father's voice suddenly broke through the silence. "It's time," he said, his voice low but filled with urgency. They had to go. Adrien and Emily exchanged one last glance before they stood, moving quickly but quietly toward the path his father had marked out for them. The chase wasn't over yet, and Emily knew they were running out of time. But she also knew one thing for certain. They were not alone in this fight. Together, they would stand a chance. They moved quickly through the woods, each step measured and cautious, knowing the council was still searching for them. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, every sound amplified by the heavy silence of the forest around them. Adrien walked beside her, his face set with determination, but she could feel the weight of his fear through the bond they shared. They couldn't stop now, not when they were so close to the edge, so close to the breaking point. As they reached a clearing, Adrien's father motioned for them to halt. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the ground. They were out of sight for now, but Emily knew it wouldn't be long before the council would catch their scent again. "We need to move fast," Adrien's father said, his voice low and urgent. "They know we're close. The longer we stay here, the more dangerous it gets." Emily nodded, trying to steady her breath. She felt Adrien's hand reach for hers, and she squeezed it, silently telling him she was ready. They had to keep moving. They had to stay ahead of the council. "Where are we going?" Emily asked, her voice trembling slightly. Adrien's father glanced at her, his eyes grim. "There's a place, a sanctuary hidden deep in the mountains. It's our only chance now." Emily's heart sank. She had heard of such places before, hidden away from the world, where people with powers like theirs could hide and regroup. But she also knew that such places were rarely safe for long. "How long will it take to get there?" she asked, trying to gauge the time they had before the council closed in. "Not long," Adrien's father replied. "But we'll need to be quick. They won't give up easily." The urgency in his voice was unmistakable. Emily didn't question him. She trusted him, trusted that he knew what they were up against. And as much as she feared the unknown, she knew she had no choice but to follow him, to follow Adrien, and to do whatever it took to protect them both. They began to move again, this time more swiftly, with a sense of purpose. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees tall and oppressive, but the path ahead was clear. As they walked, Emily could feel the bond between her and Adrien growing stronger, the connection between them pulling her forward. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, and for a moment, she thought she could almost feel his thoughts. The bond was becoming a part of her very being. But there was something else too. Something darker. The curse. It was growing stronger, and Emily could feel it, like a weight pressing down on her chest. She didn't know how much longer they could keep running before the curse consumed them both. How much farther? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Adrien's father didn't answer right away. His face was tense, his gaze focused ahead. But when he did speak, his voice was steady. "We're close," he said. "Just a little farther." They pushed on, their pace quickening as they neared the edge of the forest. Emily's legs burned with the effort, but she didn't slow down. She couldn't. Adrien's presence beside her kept her going, his quiet strength driving her forward. She could feel the weight of the curse, but she also felt something else, a sense of hope, however faint, that maybe, just maybe, they could break it. Just as the last of the trees began to thin out, Emily felt a sudden shift in the air. It was subtle at first, but then it became undeniable. The ground beneath her feet seemed to tremble, the air charged with a dark energy. Her heart skipped a beat, and she glanced at Adrien. He was looking ahead, his expression grim. "They've found us," he said softly, his voice filled with dread. Emily's blood ran cold. She could feel the council's presence now, closer than ever. They had been discovered. They didn't have much time. "Run," Adrien's father ordered, his voice urgent. "We'll make it to the sanctuary, but we need to move now. Don't look back. Just run." Without thinking, Emily grabbed Adrien's hand, and together they took off, their feet pounding against the earth. The sound of their footsteps was drowned out by the growl of wind that whipped through the trees, the air thick with the council's power. They were closing in. She could feel their eyes on her, their power pressing in like a vice, and she could hear their voices whispering in the wind. "You can't escape," one of the voices said. "You belong to us." Emily's pulse quickened, but she didn't look back. She focused on Adrien, on the bond that held them together, on the small flicker of hope that was still alive in her chest. They couldn't stop now. They couldn't let the council win. As they reached the edge of the forest, the path ahead became steeper, the trees fewer, and the air thinner. Adrien's father had warned them that the sanctuary was hidden deep in the mountains, but now Emily wasn't sure they would make it. The curse was growing stronger, and they were running out of time. She glanced back briefly, and for the first time, she saw the council clearly. Figures cloaked in darkness, their eyes glowing faintly with a malevolent light. They were gaining on them. "We're almost there," Adrien's father said, his voice tight with determination. "Keep going. Don't stop." Emily could feel the sanctuary, feel its pull, and with every ounce of strength, she pushed herself forward. They couldn't give up. Not now. Not when they were so close. The air grew colder as they ascended the mountain path, the trees thinning, and the wilderness surrounding them giving way to the jagged rocks that marked the sanctuary's hidden entrance. Emily's breath was shallow, her legs aching with exhaustion, but she couldn't stop. The council was still behind them, and each second they delayed brought them closer to being caught. Adrien's hand was tightly gripped in hers, his pulse steady but faint under her fingers, and she could feel his fear, the pressure of the curse that pressed in on them both. The weight of their situation was overwhelming, but Emily focused on their goal, the sanctuary, the last hope they had. "We're almost there," Adrien's father said, his voice strained as he led the way. "Stay focused. We need to reach the inner chamber before they catch up." Emily didn't respond, but her heart raced. She could hear the distant howls of wind cutting through the trees, the ominous rustling of leaves, as if the mountain itself was warning them. The sanctuary, hidden from prying eyes for centuries, was their last refuge. They had to make it. She knew it. They couldn't fail now. The path ahead became steeper, the rocky terrain harder to navigate. Emily stumbled twice, but Adrien's father was always there, steadying her with a firm hand, pushing them forward. She glanced back once, and her heart skipped. In the distance, the council's figures were outlined against the moonlit sky. They were closing in. Adrien's father must have seen the panic in her eyes, because his voice softened for the first time. "We're nearly there," he repeated, though Emily could hear the urgency in his words. "We're just seconds away from safety. Hold on." Adrien squeezed her hand tighter, and Emily could feel the strength in his grip. He wasn't just afraid for himself. He was afraid for her, for them both. The bond they shared was stronger than ever, but it was also making it harder for Emily to stay grounded. She could feel Adrien's emotions as if they were her own, the fear, the hope, the desperation. She wanted to ease his burden, but it felt impossible. The curse had a hold on him, and the council would stop at nothing to keep them from breaking it. Just as Emily was about to speak, a gust of wind whipped past them, carrying the scent of rain and something far darker. She turned her head sharply, and her stomach twisted in fear. The council had arrived. Figures cloaked in black, their eyes glowing with an eerie light, appeared in the shadows behind them. Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Go," Adrien's father said, his voice fierce, and he pushed them forward, his hand no longer just guiding but commanding them. "Don't stop until you're inside." The ground seemed to tremble beneath their feet, and Emily's legs burned as they ran the last stretch of the path. She could hear the council behind them, their footsteps heavy and purposeful. Time was running out. As they neared the entrance, the sanctuary's hidden door finally came into view, an ancient stone archway, overgrown with ivy and moss, barely visible against the rock face. Adrien's father reached for the door, his fingers brushing the stone, and with a low growl, the stone shifted, slowly opening. "Go," he shouted, ushering them inside. Emily didn't hesitate. She pulled Adrien with her, their feet barely touching the ground as they sprinted through the entrance. They were inside the sanctuary, but the danger was far from over. The door slammed shut behind them, and Emily could hear the echoes of the council's pursuit reverberating outside. She glanced around the sanctuary's interior, an ancient chamber lit by flickering torches. The walls were covered in cryptic symbols and markings that seemed to pulse with energy, as if the very stone had been infused with magic over centuries. It was a place of power, a place that could hide them, at least for now. But Emily didn't feel safe, not yet. "What happens now?" Emily asked, her voice strained. Adrien's father took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the room before he spoke. "Now, we break the curse." Emily stared at him, unsure whether she had heard him right. "Break the curse?" she repeated. "How?" Adrien's father nodded grimly. "This sanctuary holds the key to breaking the curse, but you both must be willing to face it. You'll need to tap into the magic here, the power that's been locked away for centuries. Only then can we break the chains that bind Adrien." Emily felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. The power she had felt before, the connection with Adrien, had been overwhelming enough, but now she was being asked to unlock something even greater, something older, far more dangerous. She could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on her. "How?" she asked again, her voice barely a whisper. Adrien's father walked toward the center of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the silence. "There are ancient rituals here, but you must first understand the true nature of the curse. It isn't just a spell, it's part of who Adrien is. To break it, you must accept that part of him." Emily felt her heart race as the reality of his words sank in. She didn't know how she could ever accept the darkness that surrounded Adrien's past, the curse that had haunted him for so long. But she also knew she had no choice. She had promised to help him, and to do that, she had to face whatever darkness was coming. "We're ready," Adrien said, his voice strong, though she could hear the uncertainty underneath. "We have to do this." Emily nodded, though her stomach churned with fear. Together, they would face whatever came next. She wasn't just fighting for Adrien's freedom anymore. She was fighting for their future. And for the first time, she realized that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance to break the curse and survive. The chamber was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Emily took Adrien's hand once more, and together, they stepped into the unknown. The chamber was silent, save for the faint whisper of the wind outside, a reminder of the world they had left behind. Emily and Adrien stood side by side, hands tightly clasped, their breath steady despite the weight of the moment. The walls around them seemed to pulse with an ancient energy, as though the very stones were alive, waiting for the next step in the ritual that would either break the curse or bind them forever. Adrien's father stood at the center of the room, his face grim, his eyes scanning the markings on the floor. He had said that this was their only chance, that the sanctuary held the key to breaking the curse, but the path forward was unknown, even to him. "This is it," Adrien's father said, his voice steady but filled with an unspoken fear. "You must open yourselves to the magic in this place. You must accept the darkness within Adrien, and in turn, break the curse. Only then will he be free. Emily looked at Adrien, his pale face bathed in the flickering light of the torches that lined the room. He met her gaze, his eyes filled with the same mixture of fear and determination she had seen so many times before. This was it. He whispered. Emily nodded. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't do this without him. They had fought together for so long, and now they had to face the final battle. Together. Adrien's father stepped forward, his hands raised, his eyes closed as he began to chant in a language Emily couldn't understand. The words seemed to echo in the air, resonating with the ancient power of the sanctuary. Emily could feel the air shift around them, growing colder, thicker, as if the room itself were coming alive. She felt the bond between her and Adrien flare to life, stronger than ever before. The darkness of the curse was here, wrapping around them like a cold, suffocating fog. She could feel Adrien's emotions as if they were her own, his fear, his pain, and the overwhelming weight of the curse. And yet, through it all, she felt something else, too. A spark of hope, a flicker of light. She squeezed his hand tighter, willing herself to stay strong. The ritual was beginning. The air around them crackled with energy, and Emily felt the ground beneath her feet tremble. Adrien's father continued to chant, his voice rising and falling with a rhythm that seemed to match the beat of their hearts. The magic in the room grew stronger, and Emily felt herself being pulled into it. She could feel the curse, its dark tendrils reaching out, trying to bind her and Adrien, to keep them from breaking free. But Emily wouldn't let it. She refused to let it win. You have to let go, Adrien's father said, his voice sharp. You must accept the darkness, Emily. Only then can you destroy it. Emily closed her eyes, her breath coming faster as she felt the weight of the curse pressing down on her. She had always fought against the darkness, but now, she had to face it head-on. She had to embrace it, to accept it, in order to break it. With a deep breath, she opened herself to it. The curse flooded through her, dark and cold, filling her with an overwhelming sense of despair. She felt Adrien's pain, his loneliness, his centuries of suffering. She felt the weight of his bloodline, the ancient curse that had haunted him for so long. But through it all, she also felt him, his strength, his courage, his love. And with that, she knew what she had to do. Emily focused on the bond between her and Adrien, on the love that had grown between them. She couldn't let the curse take him. She wouldn't. With a final, shuddering breath, she reached deep inside herself, drawing on every ounce of strength she had left. She felt the power within her surge, a light piercing through the darkness. And then, in one powerful moment, she let go. The curse screamed in her mind, a terrible roar of anger and despair, but Emily didn't flinch. She held on to Adrien's hand, her fingers entwined with his, as the light grew brighter and brighter. The darkness shattered, splintering like glass, until there was nothing left but the light of their bond. And then, everything went still. Emily opened her eyes, and the room was quiet. The weight of the curse was gone, and the air was warm and clear. Adrien was still holding her hand, his eyes wide with disbelief. We did it, he whispered, his voice shaking with emotion. Emily smiled at him, her heart swelling with relief. They had done it. The curse was broken. The darkness that had haunted Adrien for so long was finally gone, and they were free. As they stood there, surrounded by the light of the sanctuary, Adrien's father stepped forward, his face softened with approval. You have done it, he said, his voice filled with a rare warmth. You've broken the curse. Adrien is free. Emily nodded, still in shock, still trying to process everything that had happened. She had never imagined that this day would come, that they would succeed. But here they were, together, in the light of a new beginning. What now? Emily asked, her voice filled with wonder. Adrien smiled at her, his face full of hope. Now we live, he said softly. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Emily believed him. They were free, and the future was theirs to shape. Together. In this thrilling adventure, we dive into the world of vampire stories where ancient curses, dark magic, and powerful forces collide. Follow Emily and Adrien as they navigate a path filled with danger, mystery, and the inevitable consequences of a curse that has haunted Adrien for centuries. As their bond grows stronger, they discover that breaking the curse is not just a matter of magic, but also of sacrifice, facing fears, and trusting each other. Set in a hidden sanctuary, their journey through treacherous terrain reveals what it truly means to fight against dark forces that have controlled their lives for so long. With every step, the weight of Adrien's past and the dark forces pursuing them grow heavier, but they refuse to give up. As Emily embraces her connection to Adrien, she must face the darkness within herself and break the chains of the curse, making this one of the most captivating vampire stories you will ever experience. This story takes you through the trials of self-discovery, the strength of love, and the power of choosing your destiny, all set against the backdrop of one of the most compelling vampire stories ever told. Whether you're a fan of ancient mysteries or the allure of the supernatural, this story offers everything you're looking for in vampire stories. As the climax nears, the question remains, can Emily and Adrien defeat the curse, or will the forces that seek to destroy them win? Join them on this unforgettable journey through one of the most intense vampire stories you've ever read.